I had always wanted to give Pirate 101 a try, but never really gave it a chance until now. I think when it had initially released, I was deep into Guild Wars 2. By the time I had the right mindset to dip my toes in, I was very turned off from the idea of paid subscription fees and microtransaction games. After seeing that the game was going through a free week-long trial period, I figured now was my best opportunity to give it a go. Ultimately, I ended up sitting with the game for a grand total of 26 hours, and managed to bring my character to the level of 15. This video will be based around my verbatim thoughts and opinions of the experience. Ahoy, I'm Scurvy Banana, and I make videos about video games with pirates in them. While today I'm doing a bit of a first look recap, I also make video guides and reviews. If you'd like to check out more of my stuff, go ahead and pillage the subscription button. Thanks. If you are unfamiliar with Pirate 101, I'll drop in a quick synopsis here. It is a pirate-themed tactical combat massively multiplayer role-playing game by King's Isle Entertainment, and it was released in 2012. It has a target audience of children, and is set in the same spiral universe as their main game, Wizard 101. Wizard 101 seems pretty similar, but is of course wizard-themed, and its combat exists as a card game. Since this game is an mmorpg, I had a difficult time trying to figure out how I would be able to cover it in a way that is fair. MMOs are very large and long games that can have very different experiences between newbie and endgame gameplay. Because of this, I think this video is going to have to be a split multi-part, with this current video being more of a first look, in which case I voice my immediate thoughts and feelings about it, rather than a full comprehensive game review. During my playtime, I managed to complete what I believe to be all of the content available on and around Skull Island, including side quests, up to the first visitation of Monquista. I'm still a bit confused how it is laid out, but I think the game considers this to be Book 1 and Book 2. This video will be covering my playtime through the first sections of Book 1, while the follow-up video will conclude with the rest. First up, the game gives you a short download, and then you've got to sign up. After filling out your info to make an account, you'll log in, and the launcher will continue downloading. Maybe I just wasn't looking too hard here, but I felt a bit frustrated that I couldn't find an option to fully download the game through the launcher. I felt this way because I tried Wizard 101 in my younger years, and I am aware the game continues downloading as you play, but assets don't seem to be told to download until you run into them while in-game. This means that for an extended period of time, you'll go into new areas or run into new players and have a giant loading icon on your screen. A minor annoyance.
That's pirates for you. Can't be trusted. Not a one of them.
After starting up the game, you are immediately dropped into the intro cinematics and character creation. A Santa Claus reminiscent man named Boochbeard with his sidekick, a monkey, Mr. Gandry, are busting you out of a ship's brig. The sections of character creation are overlaid with full voice acting as well as intertwined with cartoony animations depicted as puppet shows. Suddenly, I felt childlike wonder and became enamored with this whimsical world.
You must be a good shot. The people of Marylebone are known for their accuracy.
Okay, so despite even this first section really sinking its teeth into me, I do have a few qualms. I'm not going to complain about having to use preset names, nor will I moan that the character creation is lacking. My issue is that through this, there are permanent character and game-altering choices that aren't explained thoroughly here. The "how do you lose your parents" question is tied with which companion character you get later. The "where did you grow up" question is tied to a small but permanent stat boost applied to character. And finally, the "how did you get arrested" question chooses your character class. There's not very good indication of what any of this stuff means, so I feel like a lot of people are probably going to play it and discover by trial and error, or do what I did and have to alt-tab out of the game to look up what this stuff actually means. I understand this game is for children and I'm looking at it as an adult, but I feel as though if I'm confused about what exactly these choices do, a child in the same position surely would be confused as well. I think this is outright poor game design if I have to exit the game completely to Google search what any of it means, especially when a simple text box with a brief description like picking the brawler option will make your character a buccaneer. A buccaneer is a close combat melee fighter that uses a sword, would suffice.
Must dress to impress. How do you present yourself?
My confusion aside, the game has 5 character classes, as most people are likely familiar with standard RPG character archetypes at this point. The Musketeer is a ranger, the Witch Doctor works as a mage, the Privateer is more of a hybrid healer like a paladin, the Buccaneer is the warrior, and a Swashbuckler is a rogue. My character ended up being a Marleybone-raised musketeer after my parents were mutinied.
Get blown to bits!
Run up the stairs at the end of the hall!
After character creation, you begin to run out of the ship with the Santa Beard, and you encounter Deacon, the spy master of the Armada. These masquerade masked robots seem to be the big bad guys. This is the first instance of combat. The camera pulls up to a top-down view of the playing field, characters take turns moving on a grid, and you'll also get various special moves and spells to use. You control your created character as well as companion characters. I'd say it's something similar to chess at the very basic, or maybe the combat from the old Heroes of Might and Magic games. My personal comparison would be that it is also similar to the French MMO games Dofus or Wakfu, but I know those games have a pretty small audience, so most people are likely unfamiliar with them. After the combat tutorial, we're in control of a ship, and at this point I realized that this is a game about sky pirates. I think this is the first time I've played a game about sky pirates, though typically the association there is more with the whole steampunk thing.
You ain't heard? I'm steampunk now. Yeah, I don't know what that is, man.
Pirate101 seems to still go more in the direction of Golden Age Caribbean tropes. We are, unfortunately, made to skip the boat combat here and sail away. I'm not sure why a ship combat tutorial was cut from this section, as it seems like it would have been a perfect place for it.
We've done it! Click the boost button or press Z again to return to normal speed.
That's better. Now, set course for the docks at Skull Island before any more clockworks find us.
After Boochbeard dumps us on Skull Island, we are to meet with Captain Avery. Something about his model seems off, like the textures are more gritty or sharpened than the smoothness of the rest of the game? I wonder if at some point they were starting to update the graphics and his model got stuck in limbo between new and old?
If you're to be a pirate, you'll need a ship. Do this right, and I'll give you one. You have my word of honor. Do we have an accord?
At this point, the game finally lets you free, and it took a minute to get used to the clunky movement controls and the odd second of delay going in and out of buildings. I think if there was a button push to go in and out of buildings, that would make it feel less awkward, because as it stands now, you just walk into a place that may or may not be a doorway, and then you get a loading screen. Just as well, what I mean by awkward controls is that you cannot turn or strafe simultaneously with the WASD keys while also using mouse look to turn your character. That seems to be the standard in most other third-person games and MMOs that I have played, so it's a noticeable, slight, awkward change of movement controls. It felt odd at first, but I quickly got over it. I then had to investigate by clicking on each and every individual piece of my user interface to see what it did. I scrolled through the options menus, dug around in my backpack, discovered some cool titles and emotes. I watched one of the most pitiful jump animations in an MMO that doesn't even enable you to actually jump over any obstacles.
Welcome home, pirate. This house is your refuge from the crowded skies.
Finally, I clicked the house button. Wow, I was impressed. Fully customizable housing, how fun. I later discovered that after you get a ship, there is also a similar function for your cabin. After realizing I had no furniture to actually place in my house, I decided to continue questing. After feeling like I had gotten the hang of the combat, at least a little bit, I figured before I got in too deep I ought to give some of the other classes a try. At this point, I still wasn't quite sure what each one entailed. I ended up re-rolling my character to be a witch doctor. I felt it seemed to be the most unique thematically. Pirate games often have a minor in voodoo, but it always seems like an afterthought. Here, my entire class and character should be based around it. Very cool idea. I love that my main stat is now spooky.
You wait for your team to join up.
Furthering the story, we're set to fight off the tutorial boss, a shark parody of Vin Diesel from the movie Chronicles of Riddick. He's comically been named Finn Dorsal. This is probably the first real major pitfall I felt while playing the game, the failed explanation of group instances and difficulty. As far as I would assume, if the game is prompting me to create a 4-person group to go into an instance, it must be a difficult expenditure and not soloable, right? Well, later on I discovered these all seemed to be doable alone, however at this point I didn't know that, so I wasted a ton of my time waiting around for players to join my queued group. I was very concerned that it would be unviable to play the game almost entirely if there was a large amount of group-required content and not enough active players to fill slots. Ultimately, I found this to be untrue, but this serves as a reminder that this game seems to have a lot of failed explanations within. Again, if I'm an adult and don't seem to understand, how would the target audience? Now that I've completed the first quest section and been rewarded with some upgraded gear that makes me look like some sort of voodoo pilgrim, I set out to see what is offered in the form of side quests. First up, I ran into the minigames. I actually really love that this is a feature here. While they are just simply Pirate101 themed variants of some classic arcade games, it was still very fun to play them to break up the typical MMO gameplay monotony. I especially liked the shooting range minigame. Fortunately, it seems I didn't hit the record button here, but I also discovered another game within the game in the form of Pet Battles. It functions with a sort of idle background mechanic that serves to level up and to train the pets, but then pivots to actually hands-on turn-based pet battles. I also noticed that a similar sort of feature was found in the Companions tab, where your companions can also be idly sent on missions as well. Again, I like these features, and I think the optional micromanagement seems like a fun background activity that serves to break up the monotony. Despite pointing out the discrepancy in certain models earlier, I truly enjoy the art direction and general styling of this game. The cartoony storybook characters, the hand-drawn cutscenes, the silly pop culture references, and the playful music. I wish this title would have been released when I was the right age for it, because I likely would have spent years living in it. On the other side of this, further playing, I was met with a couple noticeable copy-pasted assets. Not the end of the world, but I did think, oh, I've been in this exact dungeon before. As well as this, it took me way too long to figure out how to resize the UI. At default, it is set to very large, and was actively getting in the way of gameplay almost constantly visually on top of the game's subtitles. I need to address the biggest elephant in the room still, and that would be monetization. This is always a point of contention with online games like this, and I feel it is my duty to try to explain how it functions for Pirate 101 and why it is ultimately the reason I will be unlikely to play post-free trial week. Even though Pirate 101 is presented as a quote-unquote free-to-play game, this is fundamentally untrue considering the breadth of actual free content seems to expire after completing the tutorial. This is not an open-world game akin to RuneScape that has a sufficient amount of gameplay to be considered free. Pirate 101's free content is really more like a demo. For context, even on the website's chapter pricing section, it doesn't even consider the prologue worthy of being free content, only the introduction and the first step of the prologue. This is a very, very limited amount of content. To unlock the content further, it can either be bought permanently, as each set of quests is an individual chapter, or you can pay a monthly subscription fee to have everything unlocked. There are some pretty standard benefits to paying the sub fee over buying sections individually, like larger inventory and doubled experience gain. On top of the sub fee, this game also has microtransaction shop with various amounts of cosmetics, characters, and of course, loot boxes in the form of card packs. Now, this sort of stuff I'm really not a fan of, and to really dig into it would have to be a dedicated video by itself. In the end, as far as its application to Pirate 101, I really can't say much with authenticity and honesty. By that I mean I really didn't get to the point in the game where I can tell truthfully if this is a pay-to-win cash shop situation. I did have a lot of fun during my playtime, and I never felt like I was pressured to spend extra money outside of the sub-fee content which I was playing. But I remain incredibly wary and doubtful over these sorts of microtransaction shops in general, and I think that you should be wary of them too. Overall thoughts? I kept playing it. Honestly, if this game wasn't tied to a subscription fee, I'd likely still be playing it. I really, really did love the graphics and the world that had been crafted, and despite its sometimes clunky feeling controls and interface, I was pretty hooked. I also quite enjoyed the board game-like combat, which was a really nice change of pace compared to other MMORPG games. To finally finish up my gameplay experience though, the game crashed. Okay, so it seems to not like to get along with me alt-tabbing so much or using OBS to record, which means I made it crash a lot actually. Despite that, I kept playing it. I ended up doing what I think is 100% of the Skull Island content, which ended up being a pretty decent chunk of game. The rest of this content will be featured in a follow-up video. Thank you for taking the time to make it this far in this video, and since you're still here, I'll let you in on a cool monkey fact. In the wild, monkeys don't actually eat bananas. Monkeys in captivity that are fed bananas actually often develop diabetes from the high sugar content of bananas.